You gon' be soaked, so listen up, cause this hair of the dog, what's real, what ain't, is this the fog or smog? Cause there's a difference when you breathe it in, so don't let the corporate media take you for a spin. This that morning show, they put you in the know, so I hope that you ready, cause all we do is go, go, go. Yeah, come get your info, you gon' be like, whoa. Hair of the dog, we bout that, ayy, we in the zone, we out here, yeah, spitting the facts.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Friday and Hair of the Dog. I'm Andy Kennedy on this kind of weather wishy-washy morning. Hope everyone had a good Thanksgiving. And if you're an anti-masker, welcome to Infection Friday and Super Spreader Saturday. We are going to be talking about some wonderful topics this morning, and they might be a little bit dry, but we are going to do our best to make them lively, fun, and exciting. And while talking about lively, fun, and exciting, I'd like to introduce my co-host, Miss Kerri Barber. Good morning, Kerri.
Good morning, Andy. Welcome to, our traditional Fucking Friday show where pretty much anything goes. We have a very loose outline of things that we want to talk about this morning, but we invite your comments and your suggestions. So we are live, which is always exciting. Anything can happen.
I would say that because we're going to be talking about all things judicial, that we should call it Fucking Friday, Your Honor.
Thank you. Yes, exactly. Fucking Friday, Your Honor. So for those of you who are joining us for the first time, since we are live, we will see your comments, your critiques, your suggestions, your complaints, and absolutely everything. And let me save you the trouble. I already know my lighting is bad. So thank you. But if you're posting your comments on Facebook, on Twitter, on Twitch, YouTube, any of those, we will see them live. So please do jump in, and to follow along on our chosen topic this morning, I will post the links, and you are free to go out there, take a look, and tell us exactly where you think we're wrong, we're right, or something that maybe we didn't catch. So Actually,
I'm going to start right off by saying that you're wrong about your lighting. Your lighting is actually quite good this morning. I'm sorry, I don't mean to sound surprised, but it looks almost human.
Okay, well, first, here's the behind the scenes. First, it's not bright and sunny here in Albuquerque like it typically is. It's a little overcast. So that's number one. Number two is I am wearing 2 shades darker foundation so that I look like I actually have a pulse.
Oh.
So it's all make-believe. Absolutely.
As long as it's not Trump orange,
No.
We don't want to go there, especially during the transition.
Right. No, this particular color is called a Celtic Bronze, which is a light taupe.
which is basically just slightly off-white.
Yeah, it's eggshell.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. That's amazing. I bet people don't know. People just don't realize, if you're from that region of the world, really there's no pigment at all. Quite honestly.
No, and I'm one of those that I glow, and this literally would be my tan at the end of the summer. So, yeah, I'm taupe.
Wow.
Yeah. So
do they make a B200 for sunscreen?
That's me.
It's called zinc. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the behind the scenes secret of the production. Our high-class production here. Totally high value.
That's when we know we've made it, when you can yell, makeup!
That's exactly right. So let's go ahead and get started this morning. Today, you can't see it, and maybe it's not PG, but I'm wearing my Denver, Colorado t-shirt in honor of Mayor Mike of Denver, who he held a press conference about Thanksgiving and staying socially distant and how to be safe and bring down the numbers in Denver and all across the state of Colorado, and then immediately boarded an airplane to go to Mississippi to a family gathering. So he has since apologized for not taking his own advice within 30 seconds of being on TV to give that advice. So
here's your sign.
Yeah, that was Mike Hancock of Mayor of Denver. Wow. Yeah, what an idiotic thing to do. So, and we saw that, like the Macy's Thanksgiving Day parade still went on, and this is a parade with hundreds of thousands of people lining the sidewalk, and everyone goes, "Oh, but it's outside." Okay, all right. Everybody wear a mask, be outside, do the best you can, I guess.
That's one of the biggest rules for COVID-19 is it must stay indoors. Hence, it get cold.
Right. And I got to be honest, one of my own family members, I was talking to them on the phone, doing the obligatory happy holiday phone call. And this person was saying, yeah, well, we're taking precautions. It's a little chilly here, but we're going to open the windows. So when everybody gets here, the COVID will just go right out the window. I'm like, oh, okay. Do you have life insurance? Do you have a will?
You're lucky if you live in an area where you have free range COVID.
That's exactly right.
And which governor or public official was it in one of the Midwest states that I think did not mandate masks 4 days before catching COVID? Did you see that story? I think that was yesterday.
Was that North Dakota?
It might have been. Right? Okay. There's another, big red L on the forehead. Right?
That's exactly right. So real quick, we have people joining us this morning who are weighing in. Jerry, good morning. I don't think we've seen you on a live broadcast, but good morning. Welcome to the show. We appreciate your comments and feedback. And yeah, so thank you so much, especially after the U.S. Gluttony Fest. Most people are off today. Some people are shopping. Today is actually, this call came from the UK, a boycott Amazon day today on Black Friday, which actually 1 day of no sales for Amazon, just 1 day. The whole goal is to kind of shut down ordering. So this doesn't mean you can't order on Saturday and still get those deals, but just for today, maybe you don't. Maybe today you just don't, or wait till Cyber Monday. So that call came from the UK to yesterday. So let's see who's participating in that. I think it has if enough people participate, tends to have a little bit of a ripple effect so that you can kind of get the attention of a multi-billionaire. Maybe, the real job creators, the people who are spending the money, maybe you should have a voice. So I just want to put that out there. We'll see how that happens. But yeah, I don't know. Andy, after your typical Canadian Thanksgiving, what is the thing that you do the day after?
Go to work. Our Thanksgiving is simply just a day, right? It's a 1 day holiday on the Monday after weekend, right? So you get the weekend, you do your traveling, you sit down either Sunday night or Monday night, depending on your travel plans, back, and then you're back to work on Tuesday. So it's not a 4 day holiday of gluttony that the American ones has, right? It's a little bit different. And I don't think it's as typically as a big a deal. The funny thing for me is it's usually right on my birthday. And, so when people say, well, when's your birthday? I say, well, it's Thanksgiving for obvious reasons. Right?
So everybody in Canada is thankful for Andy.
Pretty much, yeah. That's what I go with it.
Nice. Well, we thank you too. So, all right.
You're
so
welcome.
This morning, This morning we have a special guest. This is a friend of the show. He's been on a couple times to talk about how the behind the scenes on elections, how the technology actually works. Focused in Illinois, but it's applicable in other states too. So without further ado, let's bring on his snarky self, Mike Tauler. Good morning, Mike.
Good morning. And Andy, to be fair, it may be dry topics today, but my understanding that Ben Shapiro's turkey was awfully dry too.
Yes, the outside maybe, but not the inside.
Okay, guys, let's keep it PG. PG.
What? Kerri!
I was talking about a turkey. I don't know where your mind is.
Okay.
You can't blame me for that.
Wow. I'm going to have to reevaluate your position with this company.
I was just thinking it's a good thing Brandon's not here right now because he did the entire show on WAP a couple weeks back. So, oh, goodness. So, all right, well, let's get into it. And Mike, feel free to weigh in with your perspective. But in particular, we're going to talk about these lawsuits, the 44 lawsuits that the Trump campaign is only claiming 3 of them. The rest they say is, these are people who have been wronged around the country. No, these were coordinated. So first one, Andy, the Reuters article. So the topic that's been going around social media is, we can't wait. We are so thankful that Biden won. And here are all the crimes that Trump is alleged to have committed, his family, things like this. Like we saw Ivanka early on in the administration come out and turn the White House into like QVC. Do you love the bracelet that she's wearing? You can buy it too, just for $2,000. We saw all of that. And I hate to tell people, none of that is illegal. None of it. It's wrong, but it's not illegal. So Ivanka, for all of that, Ivanka and Jared probably aren't going to be up on charges. And by the way, Joe Biden has already made statements and told insiders within his own transition team, he's not prosecuting. So this is a longstanding tradition. There's no law that says an incoming administration has to prosecute the prior one for crimes. And the reason why they don't do it is a gentleman's agreement. I don't want to be prosecuted when I leave office by the next person that comes in. So you saw this when we had the war crimes and Obama came into office. Everyone's like, are you gonna? And his statement was, we're looking forward, not backward, meaning, no, I'm not prosecuting any of them. Right.
Isn't it funny that when you think about this, well, I'm not going to prosecute him because there's a good chance I'm going to be corrupt too.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Exactly right. So this is why I think for those people who have any type of hope in the change, not going to happen. And I'm sorry to be the one to tell you that, but you need to know right now that the chances are almost zero that Trump will be prosecuted by this administration. Now, what could happen, and this is why I pulled this article from Deutsche Bank. Deutsche Bank, they've been in the headlines for years. So now Deutsche Bank has publicly said that they're trying to divest from a relationship with Trump, a relationship that they've had for decades, which is a weird kind of relationship if you look at kind of the history that has gone on with them. So Trump himself has defaulted on numerous loans, sued the bank, blaming them for him not being able to repay the loans. And what did Deutsche Bank do? Gave him millions more. So as I was reading this article, I was like, have you ever been in a situation where you couldn't pay your cell phone bill, couldn't pay your electric bill, couldn't any of those things, which millions of people across the United States right now are having that issue with rents and things like that? Nobody gives you more money after that fact. Nobody. But if you're a millionaire and you default and sue the person who lent you money, they have no problem lending you more money. It's just this divide in how money actually works, money and credit, that I thought was interesting and rather telling. They had no problem with it. Now, keep in mind, this is the same bank that was up on investigation for money laundering for Jeffrey Epstein. So they've been in the news quite a bit. So Trump obviously was not a pariah to them. His business dealings and his longstanding reputation for defaulting and bankruptcy, not a problem. They were totally in for Jeff Epstein amongst other people. And this is a major world bank. So I thought it was interesting that this relationship with him, and the reason why they're trying to divest from him is they said they don't like the publicity, right? Well, why would they not like the publicity? So far, it hasn't been all that great for them, but particularly now. And in my view, the reason that they're looking at divesting from him is obviously Trump is on the downward slide, but they keep getting investigated because of their relationship with some of these shady business dealers. So Andy, you want to put up the next one? So it didn't take a lot of time to get the reputation of Deutsche Bank. And I only pulled one article. This is a recent fine that they went through, $15.9 million. Now, that sounds like a lot. For you and I, it's a lot. For them, it's not even 1% of their monthly revenue. So it's a tiny, tiny fine, slap on the wrist. But what it does is put them back in the newspaper. So this is why they don't want to have a continuing relationship with Trump. It's not that they're going to change necessarily their business practices, because they've got like a decade at least that we know about from the Panama Papers of money laundering. And they're going to continue that. They just don't want the spotlight, is the way that I see it. So I don't know, Andy, am I too conspiratorial, too cynical? What do you think?
No, of course not, because the whole business model for these types of players is, okay, well, we're going to set up a federal fine slush fund, right? If we get caught doing something, we just pull money out of that and pay the fine. Because of the way the system works, nobody does jail time. Nobody really gets in any trouble. You just pay that fine, right? And we are, okay, we paid our fine, we got caught, everything's good, nothing to see here now, but nobody ever does any time. And life goes on. There's no reason to stop doing it, right? Because the Wall Street's business model is fraud, and globally, same thing. So the system just keeps going on and on, just the way it does.
Well, yeah, and in particular, the whole concept of fraud, right? So we just had this major election, and before the election, one of the candidates, the incumbent, President Trump, went back to his fallback argument from 2016. If I lose, then there was fraud. If I win, then everything was fine. And in this one, since it's already been certified, his last lawsuit in Pennsylvania is about to be thrown out. And officials in Pennsylvania are asking their own state Supreme Court to toss it completely, to not allow it to go through the standard process of appeals, because it's costing the people of Pennsylvania money. And, oh, by the way, the vote's already been certified. So this is kind of why I wanted my Tauler to weigh in, who obviously can't speak to Pennsylvania, but just in general terms about this whole concept of fraud. So fraud when it comes to Trump, obviously in tandem, the business relationships that Trump has, they don't want that word fraud pushed around. So I think that these two concepts are related. So, Mike, are you still with us?
I'm still here.
All right. So, fraud in the election. So the Trump campaign, we talked about it in more detail, but how they were saying that there was election fraud, not necessarily voter fraud, which are two different things, but election fraud. The system was hacked, votes were flipped, and none of it could be certified. So in your view, how likely is that?
Extremely unlikely. But first, I just want to say, when you get Deutsche Bank, getting fined $15.9 million, but they made $30-40 million on whatever they were doing. That's a good business investment. From their aspect, they made profit, right?
Yeah.
But when it comes to the Trump and the election fraud stuff, what we're dealing with here is you see them get up on TV and they bluster and election fraud, and then they get into the courts and all of a sudden they're like, no, we're not saying there's fraud. That's because there's actual consequences once they're in front of the judge, right? So it's all just a show of public trying to get the public on his side, rally up his MAGA red hats on his end. But as far as the ability to do that, we've got so many different systems within this country, from state to state, even from county to county. Example here in Illinois, McHenry County uses one system. Lake County, right next door, I can spit in the Lake County from here. Totally different system. So you'd have to not only infiltrate, and each one of those systems are isolated and they report back to the state. So you'd have to infiltrate all those counties. You'd have to infiltrate all those county clerks, all their systems, all their electronics, and yes, some of them do connect to the internet as a whole. For example, like here in McHenry County, our election machines, the tabulators, at the end of the night, we connect them up to over cellular. They build a VPN tunnel and transmit the results back to the county. But then we also move those ballots. That's just an initial. That's not the official count. That's just an initial count. The official count goes through after we pull the USB stick out and they run off those, not the transmitted results. So that result, if it was tampered with, totally pointless to tamper with that. You'd have to tamper with the machine. And our polling places, each one of them have multiple machines that are counting the ballots. So you'd have to tamper with those, get your hands on those, get into them. It's almost an impossibility when it comes down to it. You could maybe affect less than 1%, maybe at max.
Okay, so let's go back to the machines, because I brought up the example in working for a big company like NCR, where we did test an early debold machine over a decade ago using a thumb drive. And we were able to change the code within just a few seconds. It was like 35 seconds. But in order to affect the outcome in a meaningful way, I would have to stand at each electronic voting machine while I'm there. And as a technical judge, now I come in as a voter with my shady idea, and you hand me my voter card. So now you know who I am. And I've got this thumb drive, and I go to the first machine. Oh, no, 30 seconds didn't work. Give me another machine. How likely is it that I'm going to be able to affect the machines in that polling place? Multiple machines?
Especially when you're dealing with the more modern machines, which are more tabulator. They're more marking devices than they are actual counting and tabulating votes. Those old machines you were talking about, they kept a separate roll inside of them, and that roll kept the counts. The modern machines that you're seeing from ES&S and stuff like that, you put in a piece of paper, you push the buttons, it prints out what you chose, and then you go put it into the regular machine, which you can't get to the USB stick without unlocking it in front of everybody.
Okay, so there's like next to zero chance. I mean, there might be some outside chance like alien invasion where everybody's looking out the window, possibly. But the chances of this happening surreptitiously, zero, right?
Well, the other thing that you have to remember is the people that are monitoring these elections, this electoral process inside the actual polling stations, are people that do this over and over again because it's part of their volunteerism, right? And so they want to do a good job that they normally do. And so they're proud of what they do, and they're constantly watching. Plus each party usually has a person there that will watch and make sure that everything is above board. So if you even tried to mess with one of these machines, you would probably be noticed by a human being as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, I've done, thank you, Kerri, getting me into this. I've been doing elections for the last 4 years, 2 times a year, running all the election polling place that I've been in a numerous number of them. That wasn't an actual sentence, but you get the point. Then there's been poll watchers that show up. We usually get the state that comes in, and they like to poke around and ask questions, not to mention the party. So we get, somebody from the Secretary of State office who comes in and asks questions, checks our numbers, make sure that everything looks above board and on the up and up. So I mean, there's multiple layers. And then at the end of the night, we validate, make sure that all of our numbers add up, the number of votes, number of, pieces of paper we gave out is equal to the number of pieces of paper we have in the box at the end of the day before we pack that all up and send it back, and bring it back to the county clerk, and then they verify all those numbers again. It's so difficult. The only area that I have a little bit of a concern with the ES&S that I was talking about with the electronic marking device is that it prints it in plain English and in barcode. And what the machine reads is the barcode. So, and you can't read that barcode. And so you never know what that barcode actually says. If instead it printed it out more like a normal ballot with a marked circle or some other method other than that barcode, or maybe a separate alternate machine that you could double check before you go put it into the actual ballot box, that the barcodes are reading genuine to what you think what they're supposed to be. That's the only concern I have as a voter with those ES&S machines, is that if that firmware is corrupted from the source of ES&S, then everything out there, those barcodes are going to be off.
So is that part of the audit process?
That's proprietary technology of ES&S. We're not allowed to see their source code. Nobody is, not even the federal government or the state governments. They're not allowed to see that that source code of those machines. And that's the real concern as an IT person that I have. I think that this should be open source so that anybody can inspect that code and ensure that, that everything's above board from them on up. But they claim proprietary information, company secrets, copyright, yada, 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 yada. And they don't allow anybody to see it.
Okay, so there are 2 thoughts that I had initially. It can't be proprietary if you're using that for a public election, right? So if the code itself is being used to determine the winner and loser in an election, it cannot be proprietary. So therefore, somebody needs to take it to court, I would think. And then the second part is, why not have a secondary code like a QRC code where I, as a voter, could scan the code and verify what is going to be sent for tabulation?
2 things. I believe it has been taken to court, and that it's been upheld that they don't have to release their source code. I can't quote that. I can't cite that off the top of my head, but I do remember hearing that a couple of times. And secondly, sure, we could put in a third code there, but unless there's some sort of checksum between the two, they're completely disassociated. You could have that third code show whatever information you wanted, while that secondary, the one that's actually counted, is still doing whatever they program it to. Okay. So as long as there's a separation, you can't, unless there's some way to verify across. And unfortunately, you can sit there and scan the barcode and you'll get a number, because the barcode isn't a standard barcode. It isn't going to read out, because you can get barcodes that read out words and letters, and that's standard. Instead, it's a number that references a lookup table in a database for the so it doesn't mean anything.
Okay, so getting back to the lawsuits with Trump's elite strike force legal team, if they suspected any wrongdoing in this code, wouldn't they have presented this as evidence? Over 44 different cases across the country, they provided zero evidence, and in some cases, one or two pieces that were easily refuted. So when we're talking about the relationship between legal and process, Mike, it sounds like if you were representing or at least consulting for their strike force, maybe this is a question they could have forwarded. Any speculation as to why they didn't?
Because that question assumes that what they're doing is actually genuine and 100% above board, when instead it's just a propaganda machine, in my opinion. They are just literally blustering out in front of the cameras, and then in the courtrooms they're going, we didn't really see any evidence of fraud, Mr. Judge, who can throw me in jail for contempt of court.
Well, yeah, and we talked about that there is no recompense for getting on camera and lying to the entire public nationwide unless you're a small independent media company like we are. If you're Rudy Giuliani or one of his folks, none whatsoever. But the minute you get into a courtroom and that judge asks for definitive proof, and if you have such proof, why didn't you file the paperwork to submit it and provide it to the opposing counsel? Those questions can lead to contempt of court if you don't answer in the way that you are supposed to based on the court's rules. So yeah, we've made that case before. But real quick, I want to get to a comment that came in. This was another example provided by Jerry. He says, 10 years ago in Las Vegas, there was a scam where the controlling chips in the slot machines had insider manipulation at the factory. I think I remember this. And there are only 2 or 3 major suppliers. It allowed for a key sequence that would stimulate a jackpot situation. When uncovered, it required the big hotels to develop cyber units to oversee the machines. So Jerry says, my thought is that not only any minor individual level, but say a Russian cyber attack on the machine chips. If we can develop a worm that can attack Mideast cyclotrons without any physical intervention, it is feasible to me that the sophistication of Russia could do it. The caveat is that eventual disclosure and discovery would be an act of war, and they don't want to risk that. So, Mike, here's the theory that someone as sophisticated as KGB, which I don't think they're called KGB anymore, I'm not sure, but someone as sophisticated as a national apparatus with their cyber ops and their entire battery of programmers geared toward hacking would have the ability to manipulate our elections and flip the results. So what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, there's always the prospect of attacking the root source. I mean, all those chips, all the silicon chips are made over in China and Taiwan and everything else like that. And we've definitely seen situations where code has been injected into devices. Cisco had an issue with that, and they had to bring some of their devices back into the U.S. in order to be DoD compliant and still sell to the U.S. the entire manufacture of those devices and double check the source code on the chips, or the firmware on the chips, I should say. There is always a possibility of attacking the supply chain side and doing something there. There was just a news story about home routers that were exclusive to Walmart that had backdoors in them. These were all made over in China. They had they were completely open with default passwords that anybody could access and from the public side. It was you can find it on my page, Kerri, if you want to put that up. But it was a whole bunch of stuff about how these devices came from the manufacturer, pre-opened for that hack, allowing full access into your network. Not only that, but there was a subroutine in those routers that was totally useless to anybody to search for and connect to other nearby Wi-Fi broadcasts. So connecting to your neighbors, using that as a jumping point into nearby networks. There's always a chance of supply chain attack. And that's something that you would think that a big company like, Diebold or ES&S or all these other ones that are making these election machines would be something that they'd take into account and make sure that and verify their firmware on those chips before releasing those out into the wild.
Awesome. So we do have some technological concerns, and I just keep going back to the first time digital voting machines were introduced in Ireland, particularly in the West and South. My family members, my cohorts, took the machines, walked in, saw these digital machines, took them, drug them into the parking lot and set them on fire. And they had been using paper ballots for years. I don't know if at this point they're using the digital, but so it goes back to, all right, so we've got the example of Deutsche Bank, where you have people who are paid to make a profit doing things that openly is money laundering. And then the example that you brought up of our county voting process, where you have a bipartisan, volunteer, community invested interest to make sure that it goes off smoothly, counting the ballots. So it almost seems like to me that this is where we need to rely on neighbors and community and paper ballots, and maybe you don't get the count that night. Maybe it takes a week. Am I too old-fashioned?
I mean, the count isn't official for weeks anyway, so what does it matter what the count is that night? That's always been my thing is, election night result. It's not official and certified until weeks after the election. And even at that, it's not official until the Electoral College does their thing and the votes are counted at the Senate level. So this election night results thing has never made any sense to me. Take your time, do it right. Measure twice, cut once, not the other way around.
Oh, exactly. And the bottom line for this election night thing is the horse race from corporate media, right? We want you to sit in front of the camera or in front of your television set, nail biting and who won, who didn't win. And we've kind of gotten into this mindset of immediate results. And we brought up the point, particularly in Illinois, your mail-in ballots don't get counted for another week. And they say that the numbers released on election night do not include your mail-in ballots. Those come within the next week, and they come all at once in a final numbers dump. So, I think part of it is our expectations that election night. Yeah.
Well, the other thing, especially with this year, is the wild card, which is Trump, right? Because he set the stage to vilify mail-in ballots, although he voted by mail himself. And so this whole narrative was set up for him to, delegitimize the election in a way that anybody that was watching could see what was going to happen, right? If you say the mail-in ballots are, corrupt and not going to, shouldn't be counted, and that Republicans are going to primarily vote at the polling places and Democrats are going to vote by mail, and you have a big lead, then you can control that narrative where, one set of votes is legal and the other is illegal, right? So this was a specific set of instances that happened this year only because of that wild card, right? So normally it wouldn't be as, under a microscope as it would be just because of the Trump factor, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, and the other thing that Trump made this big deal about was that you could vote by mail and then go vote in the same day, go vote on the day of in person, and you'd be able to here in McHenry County and a lot of other places, they use an electronic poll book called Ask Ed. And Ask Ed is connected back to the county clerk's office and gets updates. If you vote in one location, it updates all the poll books in the county. and lets them know that you voted. If you requested a mail-in ballot, it shows us when we go to check you in that you requested a mail-in ballot. If that mail-in ballot has been received, it tells us. If it hasn't, it tells us. If you voted early, it tells us. So when you come to check in, we know what the status is before we even start asking you other questions.
Okay, good point. So therein again, relying on community, the local participation, and that was the thing that struck me, not to get off on another tangent, but all the arguments that were put forward either to propagandize the narrative that Giuliani and Trump wanted to have relied on people who have never been a poll watcher, who've never volunteered, who've never asked questions, who've never even read their own state or county's process. It relied on that ignorance. So once again, I got to congratulate the Trump campaign for giving us an emergency civics lesson, right? So the moral of the story is go participate in your local elections. You own it, you run it, you control it, all of these things. That is part of your civic duty. Just casting your vote is not enough. You can also participate in the audit and all of these things so that when the next person gets up there from whatever political party and says it was rigged, you will know that you are being sold a lie because you'll know the process, right?
Definitely. And, as an election judge, get out there. We need you. There's a lot of elderly election judges who are starting to age out of doing it. They're just not able to do it anymore. And we're not getting a lot of young people to replace them. So if you can take the time, and that's the big thing, is election day is on a Tuesday. Most people work. It's the whole day. It's like 18 hours worth of day. But if you can take the time, take it. Talk to your boss. A lot of places will pay you for civic duty stuff like going and being on a jury when you get called up to jury duty. Check the policy. Ask them if they consider this a civic duty in the same manner, and you'll still get a paid vacation day that doesn't come out of your vacations for it.
Excellent advice. So real quick, before we get out of here, I want to cover a little bit of an legal case roundup, some judgments that have come down, some that are coming down, and why you should care. So before I start all of this, I'm going to go back to the arguments that Andy and I have made before. If you don't want to be subjected to a judge's ruling, if you feel like the Supreme Court has been stacked one way or the other, or your local courts or whatever, this is where your local lawmakers write the laws. So you don't have to be subjected to a Supreme Court ruling stacked one way or the other if we will but just have our elected officials write good laws. It never needs to go to court because the judiciary is meant to interpret, not to write laws. And Roberts has said this numerous times as the head of the Supreme Court, the de facto head of the Supreme Court. So with that in mind, here are some stories that came down. Number one was a federal court ruling. The Supreme Court set to hear oral arguments November 30th for a New York-based case. And this goes back to the census. Do you remember when Trump was trying to get undocumented illegal immigrants removed from the census? The reason why that matters is because federal dollars flow from the census. When you fill out your census and who's doing what, how many in the household, how do you participate in your state and local, that determines the federal budget coming down from your state. So if you remove illegals, undocumented from the data collected, then states that have a high number of those, in theory, those are blue states, like Chicago has a huge number of Polish and Russian illegal immigrants. So then a state like Illinois would not get the funding to support services and general day-to-day affairs because their population is bigger than what the census shows. So this was the whole theory behind removing them. So in state court and federal court, The Trump administration will not get to remove those. It is expected to go further, but they may run out of time by the time new administration comes in and new judicial appointments are brought forward. So this is one of those instances where your congressperson or your state legislature could write a law that says we will count undocumented, illegal, the dreamers, all of these people, DACA, in our census counts. Pretty simple fix. And then the court can just go, yeah, here's the law. This is what we said. We're done, right? And throw it out. You would not have to have this nail biter through the court decisions. So that's one of them. The other, and this one, I kind of laughed at this. They said it was a midnight ruling. The Supreme Court ruled on restrictions for religious services in New York. And the majority opinion was that you cannot infringe upon religious rights. This is a First Amendment issue that was not unexpected. So what this case was about Governor Cuomo saying that, and here's where it gets funny, because I am a progressive, but I kind of agree with the Supreme Court. When Governor Cuomo said you cannot have more than 10 people in a church or a synagogue or a mosque or whatever because of COVID, but then turn around and said you can have 100 people at Costco. Wait, what? So this was the foundation of the case. But ironically, Cuomo had lifted his restrictions by the time the Supreme Court came out. The other part that was interesting, and you can go to SCOTUS blog and read about this, is the decision that came down on, it was Tuesday or Wednesday night, actually reverses prior decisions when Ginsburg was on the court for California, and I believe it was Pennsylvania. I know it was definitely California, where they said that, yes, you can mandate restrictions for public gatherings, including houses of worship. So stay tuned for that. We're going to see more on that. And then there's a petition to the Federal Appeals Court on Tuesday to end the Trump campaign's legal challenge of an election that has now been certified. And this goes back to Pennsylvania. In the state of Pennsylvania, it's already been certified in Pennsylvania. So local officials are like, why is this even in court? Judge, please toss this out. So those are the big ones coming up. And then the one that we need to be paying attention to, and no one is the Julian Assange case. And this one is interesting for a number of reasons. One is this is the first time in United States history that publishing information has been charged under the Espionage Act. So what the U.S. and British attorneys are saying is that Julian himself coerced Chelsea Manning to hack into Pentagon security information. If that's true, then every reporter who has broken a story that has implications, for example, outing Valerie Plame, that was secure information. The publishers of that information, in this case, it wasn't a journalist, it was a Bush administration, Scooter Libby, they would also be charged under the Espionage Act. Bob Woodward would also be charged under the Espionage Act. And this is why, as independent journalists are watching this case very carefully, because we've already heard some people in the Biden administration, their changeover team, who are actively calling for suppression of media, making sure that independent media and others, that there is a clamping down of the way things are reported so that they can vet the reporting before it happens. We've already seen that. We've seen this case being tried out. And then what that leaves somebody like me with is I can only report on publicly available information. And that doesn't leave a lot. So whistleblowers and things like that, all of those protections would be gone. And you would have to try it in court. And that's what Chelsea Manning and others are trying to do, is get that whistleblower status. It's not looking good. So this is why the Assange case, for me in particular, but for media all across the country, is very important. And one thing that I want to point out here it wasn't just independent media and other journalists around the world who are really terrified by the charges being brought forward, but under Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, this was the Trump administration using this law, this federal law, back in 2016 when they were alleged to have worked with Russia to pull out the emails. You remember Trump going, hey, Russia, if you've got Hillary's emails, let's publish them. They actually had to go to court for that kind of rhetoric, and they used 230 as a defense. So it's kind of interesting, but we're, again, with our dual justice system, if I get up on espionage charges because I say something, and I tend to report on corruption, if somebody gives me information and I cannot find a public source, but I can verify it through other sources, this means that I can't talk about it. I can't report on it because I could be brought up on specific charges outside of defamation or anything else. So this case is pretty significant. And then the other thing, let's be honest, one of the reasons they did not want Assange extradited to the U.S. is for torture, the risk of torture. We know we have black sites. Chicago has a black site. There are many states that have black sites where you disappear completely. Your attorney cannot get a hold of you. You do not appear in a police blotter anywhere. It's happening. This is true. But the judge in this particular hearing would not allow experts to testify on very well publicized, very well known torture that the U.S. tends to engage in either overseas or in country. And Chelsea is another one of those who could speak to it. Her attorneys could speak to it. All of that was barred. They were not allowed to talk about it. So that ruling is going to come out in January, right after, our typical Christmas holiday. And I think that date is pretty significant because people who tend to be off work and participating in family holidays, whatever your religious persuasion or not, that's the day you go back to work, right? So put that on your radar. This judgment is truly significant. And I think the entirety of this case, whatever you may feel about Assange or the information that was put out, all of that aside, the arguments that they are making right here are alarming, and everybody should be alarmed by it, in my opinion. If you think I'm wrong on that, let me know why, and why, as journalists, we should be reined in when it comes to certain information. And then, Mike, I'm going to put you on the spot here, and I apologize in advance, but I know you're a veteran. I know that you have the IT space, so I'm really interested in your opinion on this. We know that Chelsea Manning put forward information that showed U.S. activities in Iraq were not necessarily in the best interest of the mission or the people there. So your thoughts. I mean, you sign away your life when you step up to join our military. You sign away your life when you step up to join, any of our defense companies. So what should be happening here? But what are your thoughts?
Okay, first off, you have no duty to follow an unlawful order. You swear to support and defend the Constitution of the United States, not the military, not the president, not your officers. That is your first duty, is to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. Some people will say that Julian Assange and Chelsea Manning need to be pardoned. I will go one step further, and they should receive some sort of freaking medal for what they've gone through and what they unveiled for everybody. Presidential medal. They need to be rewarded, not punished.
Strong opinion. Okay, and why do you say that?
Because it's right. They've done what's right. They've upheld those standards that we hold our military to do what's right. They did that. They put their own lives, their own safety, their own health at risk because what they saw was wrong. And what more could you ask from any service member than to do that?
Good point. So thank you to John Sheftick for weighing in this morning. Appreciate your opinion. Anyone else, if you have an opinion one way or another on the Assange case, please let us know. And Mike, I kind of agree with you, but I'm in a weird space, right? So I have particular concerns because of the nature of the argument that's being made against Assange. When it came to the WikiLeaks and the Podesta emails, I remember the DNC coming down hard on Assange, and I feel like this is retribution for them because they were exposed. They never apologized for what they said in those emails and how they were degrading voters across the country. They were more upset that they were outed. I feel like the same thing is happening, but from a military perspective. When it comes to Chelsea Manning and the trial for this case. And I also feel like this is the people who should be stepping up and speaking about this aren't. And I have a biased opinion, but when you have Brian Williams and Don Lemon and all of these folks who could be tried under the same principles, not speaking up, I think they're doing it because they got a big fat paycheck that tells them to be quiet. I don't know.
I don't disagree.
Well, this is no fun. There's no argument.
No, I think that we're all on the same page here. I don't think that there's, we're talking about, some Orwellian deep stuff here, right? It's no different than the, net neutrality rules or as far back as book burning, right? We're talking about Big Brother controlling what information goes out at all times because of the narrative they're trying to portray, right? This is freedom of speech. This is human rights stuff. This is a really big deal.
Yeah, and I think the Supreme Court just ruled on the First Amendment for churches to be able to gather. This, to me, is another First Amendment issue. So while some people might freak out because Amy Barrett is suspected to have written the majority opinion, she didn't sign it. I wonder then, will they double back on a free speech issue like this? So that's something to see. And once again, rather than having the nail biter, what are they going to say? Why don't we ratify some protections that are not clearly outlined in the First Amendment? Seems to me that that's an easy way to do it, but, who am I?
Of course they will double back. It's just because they silo things. This is okay, but this isn't okay, even though that they're both in the same. They both came from the same farm.
Yeah, I think that you're right, and we will see more of that. And this is why, if you are upset about what's going on, if you're upset about certain issues, local, national, whatever, maybe it's time for you to step up and run for office. So there are ways to do it. And I know that we are working on a program here at DLF, working with some of the friends of the show who have run for office, who actually have consulting work, to launch something in the spring. And I know that, Mike, thank you. You stepped up to run for office locally because you saw some things that weren't going right in your local civic. So you are a prime example of what everybody should be considering, either library board, county board, state, whatever. So thank you.
I'm just trying to do something right. That's all.
Well, on that note, and since it's Friday, I've got nothing else, but we will be back on Monday with our promised guest, Sherry Weiss. And if you go out to our website, and I will post a link, she is a PhD level economist. She works, I don't know if I can talk about where she works for her. I'll have to ask her, but she's really, really big on economics, and she just published a thing that we were so delighted to get permission to republish on antitrust in the history of it, going forward to where we are today. So we are going to have her on our Monday program. Thank you, Sherry. And we'll talk about economics, kind of an Econ 101 for everyone. If you have ever thought the deficit is a scary, scary word on a federal level, you need to tune in and watch this show. If you thought that the deficit measured anything other than public investment, you need to watch this show. If you don't understand what antitrust is and why monopolies are bad for the free market, Monday, watch the show. So that's all I got. Andy, any closing thoughts?
If you thought Tupac Shakur was a Jewish holiday, you need to watch this show.
Thank you, Andy.
You're welcome. No, I'm excited about Monday. I get to talk about my favorite subject, the M to the M to the T.
There you go. Yep. That's exactly right. So yeah, everybody have a good weekend. Stay safe. Please wear masks, social distance. Good Lord. Yeah, let's do this right. So thank you.
We shouldn't have to keep saying this, people. Rocket science. Got to protect yourself.
Yeah. All right. Have a good weekend.
All right. And thank you, Mike, so much for your candor and your support and your technical knowledge that completely befuddles both Kerri and I.
Anytime.
Okay. Well, you guys have a great weekend, and we'll see you on Monday. Take care, everyone.
We bout that, we in the zone, we out here, spitting the facts, how it's supposed to be. Hair of the dog, we keep it neat, G.